You're watching Northern Crimes.
The Pacific Ocean crashes against the rugged Sonoma Coast, its waves carving the shoreline into a landscape of natural beauty. But beneath this postcard perfection lies a darker truth. These same waves once washed over a crime scene so disturbing it would haunt this coastal community for decades. Fishhead Beach, a secluded stretch of sand just north of Jenner, California, where driftwood gathers and fog rolls in without warning. In August 2004, this remote beach became the site of a tragedy that would shock the nation. A young Christian couple, deeply in love and planning their future together, laid out their sleeping bags under the stars. By morning, they would be gone, victims of a senseless act of violence that would remain unsolved for 13 years. This is the haunting case of Lindsay Cutshall and Jason Allen, two young lovers whose peaceful night on the beach ended in unimaginable violence. Their killer walked free for 13 years. This is Northern Crimes. On the morning of August 18, 2004, a Sonoma County Sheriff's helicopter swept low over the rugged coastline near Jenner, California. The crew had been dispatched to rescue a hiker stranded on a cliff above Fishhead Beach. But as they scanned the shoreline below, something else caught their attention. Two sleeping bags eerily still in the soft morning light. What they discovered would send shockwaves through this quiet coastal community. Inside the bags were the bodies of 22-year-old Lindsay Cutshall and 26-year-old Jason Allen. Each had been shot once in the head at close range while they slept. Their Bible rested nearby. Sheriff Steve Freitas, then a sergeant, arrived at the scene that day, unaware that the case would stay with him for the rest of his life. The couple were strangers to Jenner. They had no known enemies, and nothing appeared to be missing. Lindsay still wore her jewelry, including a diamond cross necklace. There was no sign of sexual assault. Their red Ford Tempo sat untouched in a nearby turnout off Highway 1. 4 days of wind and salt air had wiped the beach clean. No shell casings, no footprints, no witnesses, just two bodies and the rising tide. News of the murders spread quickly. Jenner, population 136, was the kind of town where people didn't lock their doors. Well, suddenly, it was at the center of a national nightmare. And for the families of Lindsay and Jason, the nightmare was just beginning. Lindsay Cutshall grew up in Fresno, Ohio, a small town tucked in the heart of Amish country. The daughter of a pastor, she was raised in a household where faith was not just a belief, but a way of life. Jason Allen came from Zeeland, Michigan, a quiet place of open skies and wide lawns where, as his mother Dolores once said, no fences separate the yards. Both were devout Christians who met in 2002 at Appalachian Bible College in West Virginia. Their connection was instant. 6 weeks after meeting, they were engaged. And by the summer of 2004, they were planning a wedding set for September 11th. That summer, Lindsay and Jason were working as camp counselors at Rock and Water, a Christian adventure camp in El Dorado County, California. They spent their days leading youth on hikes, climbing trips, and whitewater rafting, sharing their love of the outdoors and their faith with the next generation. On the weekend of August 14th, the couple took a short break from camp. They hit the road for a coastal sightseeing trip, visiting San Francisco's Fisherman's Wharf, crossing the Golden Gate Bridge, and exploring Northern California's rocky shoreline. Credit card receipts and camera photos would later trace their joyful final days. Their last night alive was spent on Fishhead Beach, a rugged, secluded stretch where camping was technically prohibited, but not uncommon. When they failed to return to camp by Sunday, August 15th, concern began to grow. One of the most haunting elements of their story is the message they left behind. In a weathered visitor's journal tucked into a wooden hutch above the beach, Lindsay and Jason had recorded their final thoughts.
The sun is going down on the horizon. All I see is the beam shining on the cliff face, and I know God is awesome. I look around and see His creation all around me. As I stir this mac and cheese, I think to myself, what a wonderful night. I've just spent 2 awesome days with my fiancée, Lindsay. Can life ever be so perfect? Only with a person who is so great. God gives me this privilege in life, and He's given me a wonderful woman to enjoy it.
The couple had found joy in each other, in their faith, and in the beauty of the world around them. They had no way of knowing that someone else was out there in the dark. The investigation into the murders of Lindsay Cutshall and Jason Allen began immediately. Detectives from multiple agencies converged on the tiny town of Jenner, bringing with them the tools of modern forensics, but few answers. The Violent Crimes Investigation Unit assigned 25 detectives to the case. From the start, they faced enormous challenges. The crime scene had been exposed to elements for days, the victims had no local ties, and the killer had left behind almost nothing. One of the first major clues came from ballistics. Experts determined the murder weapon was a .45 caliber Marlin rifle, an unusual firearm, typically used for big game or target shooting. The bullets were likely hand-loaded. No shell casings had been found, suggesting the killer had collected them after the shooting. Hundreds of tips poured in. With no local leads, detectives cast a wider net, scanning cold cases from Humboldt County all the way to Arizona, searching for any hint of the same violence. Rumors swirled. Had the couple stumbled onto a drug operation? Had they been targeted for their faith? Was it a random act of violence by a drifter? Investigators canvassed the area, going door to door with photos of the rare Marlin rifle. Roughly 100 similar firearms were recovered and tested. A $50,000 reward was posted for information leading to the killer's capture. But nothing stuck, no arrests, no leads that panned out. The public's initial panic began to fade, but for the families and investigators, the silence was deafening. Weeks turned into months. The trail grew colder with every season. What no one realized at the time was that the man responsible was still close, watching, waiting, and ready to strike again. While detectives chased leads across the country, the man responsible for the Jenner Beach murders was living just miles from the crime scene. Sean Michael Gallen, a resident of Forestville, California, had long drawn attention from local law enforcement. A self-proclaimed survivalist with a disturbing history, Gallen stood out even in a region known for its recluses and eccentrics. Just 1 week after the murders, deputies encountered him near a beach in Guerneville. He was wearing a camouflage jumpsuit and carrying a stolen loaded firearm. The encounter made him an early person of interest, but not enough to make an arrest. In August 2004, Detectives searched Gallen's apartment near the Russian River. What they found was unsettling. A 5-gallon tub filled with matchsticks, bullets, fuse cords, sections of lead pipe, clumps of hair, and copious amounts of blood in the bathroom. A large shark cut into pieces in the fridge, a wild turkey decomposing in the trash. The apartment felt like a crime scene itself, disturbed, chaotic, and brimming with warning signs. They also learned Gallen had recently altered his appearance, shaving off his beard and dyeing his hair. When questioned about the Jenner murders, he denied any involvement. He initially agreed to take a polygraph, but then he backed out. Behind the scenes, he was covering his tracks. In a jailhouse phone call later that year, Gallen asked his father, David, to dispose of his guns. David complied. When detectives returned to search for the firearms, they found none. David told them he'd tossed the weapons into a pond known as the Corbel Hole. A dive team was deployed, but found nothing. David later admitted he'd lied about where he threw the guns. Despite the deeply suspicious circumstances, there wasn't enough physical evidence to link Sean Gallen to the murders. The case remained open, and Gallen remained free to descend further into violence. Who was Sean Gallen, and what made him capable of such violence? Over the years, psychologists who evaluated Gallen painted a disturbing picture. He was diagnosed with schizotypal personality disorder, a condition marked by paranoia, social withdrawal, and disordered thinking. 2 doctors noted he exhibited signs of psychosis and loose associations, describing him as someone who would struggle to maintain basic responsibilities, let alone control violent impulses. Gallen himself said everything changed after he took a strong dose of LSD around age 21. A psychologist later concluded the drug likely intensified a mental illness that was already taking hold. He'd been partially homeschooled and never graduated from high school. Isolated and largely unsupervised, his erratic behavior escalated over time. In 2004, Gallen's father reached out to a social worker, fearing his son might hurt his younger brother, Seamus. But when the worker tried to visit the home, Gallen's mother refused to let her inside. On the few occasions she was able to meet with him, the social worker noted Gallen's poor hygiene and squalid living conditions. She brought groceries, ensured their heat worked in the winter, and quietly worried about what he might be capable of. Those concerns were well-founded. Gallen already had a history of cruelty to animals, and that same year, he was arrested for a bombing that seriously injured a woman in Monte Rio. Animal Control had received complaints about his treatment of wildlife and livestock, but the full scope of his violence remained under the radar. And still, no one stopped him. The murders on Fish Head Beach wouldn't be his last. For 13 years, the murders of Lindsay Cutshall and Jason Allen haunted investigators. Detectives remained committed, but the leads had dried up, and the trail that had once burned with urgency faded to cold ash. Then, on March 24th, 2017, the whole case took a terrifying turn. That day, Sean Gallen fatally shot his brother, Seamus, at their family home in Forestville. It was a brutal and personal act, but it also cracked open a sealed vault of secrets. Following his arrest, Gallen began to talk. What started as a series of offhanded remarks quickly turned into a full confession, one that contained chilling details only the killer could have known.
That's when I snapped. I was like, oh my God, I'm just gonna start killing people.
In chilling detail, he described walking down the bluff to Fishhead Beach in the dark, flashlight in hand. Seeing the couple asleep in their bags, he returned to his car, retrieved a rifle, and walked back. He shot Jason first. The sound woke Lindsay, who sat up in confusion. Gallon fired again. Then he cleaned up. He collected the shell casings. He burned his sandals. He even considered digging the bullets from their bodies. Ultimately, he placed the casings into a soda can and hid it deep in a blackberry bush near his father's property. 13 years later, detectives found it, just where he said it would be. Inside the rusted can, 7 spent rifle casings and fragments of a California State Parks envelope, a hidden time capsule of guilt. On May 5th, 2017, Sonoma County Sheriff Steve Freitas stood before reporters and announced the long-awaited breakthrough in the case. For the families of Lindsay and Jason, the news was both a relief and a fresh wound, proof that the person responsible had been among them all along. On May 17, 2018, nearly 14 years after the murders, Sean Gallon was formally charged with killing Lindsay Cutshall and Jason Allen. The charges marked the end of years spent waiting in agony for 2 families who'd been left without answers. For law enforcement, it was a long-awaited validation of their persistence. In June 2019, Gallon pleaded no contest and admitted to the crimes. The following month, he was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 94 years. The charges included the murders of Cutshall and Allen, the 2017 killing of his brother Seamus, and the attempted murder of a man in Monte Rio in 2004. Justice, long delayed, had finally been delivered. Gallon would never again walk free. The beaches of Jenner would never again carry the weight of his silence. And the families of Lindsay and Jason, while still bearing the burden of loss, could finally begin to lay that chapter to rest. In the years following the murders, the families of Lindsay Cutshall and Jason Allen turned to their faith, not as a way to erase grief, but as a means to endure it. Both families spoke publicly about forgiveness. They expressed a desire for justice, but resisted bitterness. It was a perspective shaped by conviction, and one that set the tone for how they chose to move forward. One of the more unexpected outcomes came from Sheriff Steve Freitas, who'd been among the first responders at the crime scene. After informing the families of Gallon's confession, Freitas was struck by their response. Not anger, but calm assurance. In particular, Chris Cutshall's reaction left a lasting impression. His quiet certainty that his daughter was in heaven challenged Freitas' own beliefs. Their conversation continued over the following months, and by 2005, Freitas said he'd experienced his own personal transformation. He became a Christian, a change that reshaped his personal life and his outlook on law enforcement. The families came to describe these ripple effects as part of Lindsay and Jason's legacy, subtle but significant changes in the lives of those their story had touched. For them, faith didn't shield them from pain, but it helped shape how they carried it. Nearly 20 years have passed since that August night on Fishhead Beach. The tides continue to rise and fall along the Sonoma Coast, reshaping the shoreline as they always have. But for those who knew Lindsay and Jason, time hasn't erased the loss. Kathy Cutshall has described her grief as a kind of homesickness, an ache that surfaces without warning. Dolores Allen still finds herself moved to tears when she comes across Jason's belongings. The absence of their children remains sharp, no matter how many seasons pass. And yet, life has continued. Both families have welcomed grandchildren. Chris Cutshall's ministry deepened in the years after the tragedy, and with it, his compassion for others. In the pain, they found purpose. For investigators, the case's resolution brought long-awaited closure. Detective John Thompson, who once referred to the murders as a, quote, black eye on his career, lived to see them solved. And Sheriff Steve Freitas, whose connection to the families reshaped his life, continues to carry their story with him. And for the town of Jenner, peace has slowly returned. What was once a haunting presence has become a memory, a scar, but no longer an open wound. Lindsay and Jason's final journal entries remain the most powerful artifact of their short time on that beach. Their words serve as a reminder. Even brief lives can leave a deep imprint, and light can endure, even in the shadows.